new administration has a tremendous responsibility, but it enjoys the confidence of the American people.
Roosevelt's Secretary of the Navy, Senator Claude A. Swanson of Virginia, headed the U.S. delegation to the Geneva Arms Parley and has been very active on naval affairs in Congress. Henry A. Wallace of Iowa, a 44-year-old editor, new Secretary of Agriculture, holds the same position his father held during the Harding administration. His selection was hailed by the farmers. Director of the Budget, Douglas.
The task which the President-elect has asked me to assume, and which I have agreed to attempt, is to formulate a plan for balancing the federal budget. We must put our own fiscal affairs in order, for this is the road to recovery.
Secretary of Commerce Roper.
I esteem it a great privilege to be permitted to cooperate with Governor Franklin D. Roosevelt as a member of his cabinet in serving the American people in these critical times.
Harold Ickes, Secretary of Interior.
No greater honor could be offered to any man than such an opportunity to serve the American people under his inspiring leadership.
I think that since the invention of photography, history will show that the cabinets of various administrations for many years have had their photographs taken during the first week of the administration. In the case of this particular cabinet, we have all been so busy that it has taken us over 8 months before we could find time enough to get photographed. Although most of you are familiar with the names and the faces of the present members of the cabinet, I shall take the liberty of introducing them to you. On my right is the Secretary of State, Mr. Howe. Beyond him, the Secretary of War, Governor Dern, and then the Postmaster General, Mr. Farley, then the Secretary of the Interior, Mr. Ickes, and on the end of the line, Mr. Roper, the Secretary of Commerce. On my left is the Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Woodin, and beyond him, the Attorney General, Mr. Cummings, then the Secretary of the Navy, Mr. Swanson, beyond him, the Secretary of Agriculture, Mr. Wallace, and on the end of the line, Miss Perkins, the Secretary of Labor.
The President of the United States visits the tomb of known soldiers. With the gravity and humility that expresses the sentiments of a nation, Mr. Roosevelt pays homage to the heroic dead who lie buried in foreign fields. And then, the First Lady of the land follows her husband in placing a floral tribute on the monument. Men and women stand with bowed heads during the solemn strains of taps, the Soldiers' Requiem.
Already great things have been accomplished. Probably 4 million citizens have gone back to work. Commodity prices have risen measurably. Perhaps as much as $50 million have been added to the monthly payroll of the workers of the nation. Remember, my friends, that unless we have higher prices for agricultural and industrial products, wages must go down instead of up. For business cannot long be carried on at a loss. Decreased wages will mean decreased purchasing power. Hence, less demand for goods. Hence, fewer men at work, and all the cruel misery of unemployment and hard times. There can be no prosperity until prices are raised. The President recognizes this fundamental fact and is bending every energy to raise prices. So, my fellow citizens, I have given you a brief outline of the President's program for a planned recovery. The President has not failed us. Let us not fail him. The Army and Navy constitute our country's best assurance for remaining at peace. We know, moreover, that if war is thrust upon us, only an efficient defense establishment can quickly restore the peace that we have lost. Its adequate support in all its elements, both personnel and materiel, is a wise policy and a splendid national investment.
Responding to Secretary Dern's invitation, the Lone Eagle calls at the War Department to discuss the future of the airmail. The appearance of Lindy in Washington is significant in view of the President's demand for the return of the service to private operations and is said to forecast early action on the new White House policy.
I invited Colonel Lindbergh down here to confer with me in regard to aviation matters in general. The Army, of course, is in aviation in a large way, and we like to get ideas from every good source. I recognize Colonel Lindbergh as the foremost authority on aviation matters in all of its branches, and I have felt that he might be able to give us some good advice, and therefore I was anxious to consult with him. He was kind enough to accept my invitation, and we have had a very pleasant conference.
The first meeting of the committee, headed by former Secretary of War Newton D. Baker, is addressed by Secretary Dern.
Gentlemen, I have asked you to give your government the benefit of your knowledge and experience in a special survey of the Army Air Corps as an agency of national defense. For your patriotic response, I express to you the thanks of the War Department. It appears that the experience of the Army Air Corps in flying the mail has raised doubts about the general efficiency of our Army Air Force. These doubts have been emphasized by utterances of critics whose competence the public cannot evaluate. Many of our citizens are bewildered. They do not know whether we have a good military air force or not. If we have, the public ought to know it and be reassured. If, on the other hand, we are deficient in equipment, personnel, or training, we want your best judgment as to what should be done to bring us up to a satisfactory standard.